One of the first and most unmistakable signs that you are dealing with an unwise woman is how she treats boundaries. Boundaries are like invisible fences that protect your time, your energy, your values, and your peace of mind. A wise woman sees those fences, respects them, and even helps reinforce them. But an unwise woman sees them as challenges to push against, rules to bend, or walls to tear down. And that alone can tell you a lot about where the relationship is headed. Think about it. When someone disrespects your boundaries, what they're really saying is, my wants are more important than your needs. That's the core of unwise behavior, an inability or unwillingness to recognize that the world doesn't revolve around them. For example, maybe you've told her that you need some time to yourself to work, rest, or focus. Instead of respecting that, she texts you endlessly, shows up unannounced, or guilt trips you for not being immediately available. That's not just neediness, it's a lack of wisdom. Because wisdom knows that healthy relationships require space, respect, and balance. An unwise woman doesn't see limits as protection, she sees them as rejection. So instead of honoring them, she tests them. If you ask her not to bring up personal details in front of others, she laughs and does it anyway. If you've made it clear you don't want to be dragged into certain kinds of drama, she pulls you in deeper. If you've said, "This is something I don't tolerate," she frames it like you're the problem for drawing the line. And here's the dangerous part: the more you allow it, the more it grows. Each time you let it slide, you're teaching her that your boundaries are negotiable. Wisdom recognizes that boundaries are not walls to keep people out, but gates to let the right people in. They show where respect lies. But with an unwise woman, you'll often feel like you're defending your gate over and over, and still she tries to kick it open. And it's not always in loud, obvious ways. Sometimes it's subtle. Sarcasm when you say no, passive-aggressive comments, or playing the victim so you feel guilty for holding firm. That's how disrespect for boundaries creeps into the relationship without you realizing how much ground you've lost. The truth is, if someone doesn't respect your no, then they don't respect your yes either. Because true respect isn't just about when things go their way. It's about whether they can honor you even when it doesn't. An unwise woman will struggle here. She'll make you feel like your boundaries are unreasonable, like you're selfish for having them. But that's just another way of saying, your needs matter less than my demands. And let's be honest, sometimes boundaries are tested early on, and it can feel flattering at first. Maybe she wants your time constantly, your attention all day, your focus on her and nothing else. At first, it looks like devotion. But over time, that intensity becomes suffocating. Because it was never about love, it was about control. Love respects boundaries. Control violates them. That's the line between wisdom and unwise living. Imagine a garden. The fence doesn't exist to keep the flowers from growing, but to protect them from being trampled. Your boundaries work the same way. If a woman consistently ignores that fence, steps over it, or criticizes you for having it, she's not protecting your growth, she's stifling it. And in the long run, you'll end up drained, resentful, and questioning yourself. The dangerous part of dealing with an unwise woman is that she may disguise boundary violations as love. She might say things like, "I just care too much," or "I only act this way because I want you close." But wisdom knows the difference between care and control. Care gives room to breathe, control suffocates. Care listens when you say, "I need space." Control manipulates you into staying when you're not ready. If her actions don't give you room to grow, they're not rooted in wisdom. Boundaries are not optional in healthy relationships. They are the blueprint of mutual respect. Without them, you're left with chaos, resentment, and confusion. And here's the sobering reality. If someone consistently disrespects boundaries early on, they won't magically start respecting them later. In fact, the pattern usually gets worse. What feels like minor disrespect today can grow into major control tomorrow. So when you notice that an unwise woman disregards your time, your values, or your limits, pay attention. That's not a small flaw, it's a warning sign. Because wisdom doesn't just know how to love, it knows how to respect. And without respect, love can't survive. That's why the very first sign you should watch for is this: does she honor your boundaries, or does she constantly test them? Because if she can't respect the fence, she'll never protect the garden. Another unmistakable sign that you're dealing with an unwise woman is the way she uses her words. Pay attention to her conversations, because what fills her mouth reveals what fills her mind. An unwise woman thrives on gossip and negativity. Instead of speaking life, she speaks criticism. Instead of building others up, she tears them down. And if you spend enough time around her, you'll notice how that constant stream of negativity begins to shape the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you see the world. It often starts small. She'll make offhand comments about a friend, a co-worker, or even a family member. At first, You might think it's harmless venting. Everyone vents sometimes, right? But the difference is that venting is occasional, while gossip is habitual. Venting clears the air, gossip pollutes it. And with an unwise woman, you'll find the conversation almost always drifts toward who's failing, who's struggling, or who's not good enough. It becomes her default mode of communication. You'll also notice how she pulls you into it. Gossip rarely stays one-sided. She'll start with, "Did you hear about so-and-so?" Or, "Can you believe what she did?" And before long, you're not just listening, you're participating. That's the trap. Because when you engage in gossip with her, it feels like connection. It feels like you're bonding. But it's a shallow bond built on tearing others down. And if she's willing to talk about them with you, don't think for a second she won't talk about you with them. Negativity works the same way. An unwise woman tends to magnify problems and minimize blessings. She sees what's wrong before she ever acknowledges what's right. She focuses on obstacles instead of opportunities. You could have 10 good things happen in a day, and she'll zero in on the one bad moment, replaying it over and over. And if you spend enough time listening to that kind of mindset, it starts to rub off. You walk away from her drained, not encouraged, heavier, not lighter. That's because words carry weight, and unwise words weigh you down. Wisdom, on the other hand, knows the power of the tongue. A wise woman understands that words can heal or hurt, build or break, bless or curse. She uses her words carefully. But an unwise woman is careless. She'll say whatever feels good in the moment, even if it wounds, even if it divides, even if it poisons the atmosphere. And what makes it so tricky is that she might dress it up as honesty. She'll say, "I'm just telling it like it is." But really, it's not honesty. It's hostility disguised as truth. Think about this: if someone spends most of their time talking negatively about others, it's not just a reflection of who they're talking about, it's a reflection of their own heart. A wise heart looks for the good even in tough situations. An unwise heart looks for the bad even when things are good. And when you're in close relationship with someone like that, it's like living under a constant storm cloud. Even when the sun is shining, she'll find a way to remind you that rain is coming. There's another layer to this as well. Gossip and negativity don't just affect relationships with others. They affect how she treats you. If she's constantly gossiping, eventually those critical eyes turn on you. If she's constantly negative, eventually that negativity spills into your relationship. What once felt like charm at the beginning starts to feel like criticism later. And no matter what you do, it never feels like enough. That's the fruit of an unwise tongue. It doesn't build, it breaks. Now, some people will excuse this by saying, "That's just how she is. She's blunt, she's outspoken." But bluntness without wisdom is just recklessness. And the truth is, constant negativity is never harmless. It seeps into your mindset, your choices, your confidence. You start catching yourself doubting people you used to trust, complaining about things you never used to notice, or living in suspicion instead of peace. That's what happens when you let gossip and negativity live too close to your ear. The hardest part is realizing that it doesn't just affect your relationships with others. It affects your relationship with yourself. When you're constantly surrounded by someone who speaks negativity, you start believing it about yourself. Little by little, your confidence erodes. Little by little, you start hearing her voice in your own head, doubting your abilities, questioning your worth, second-guessing your choices. That's how powerful words are. They don't just describe reality, they create it. So how do you know if you're dealing with an unwise woman? Pay attention to how you feel after the conversation. Do you feel encouraged, or do you feel drained? Do you feel like you've gained perspective, or like you've been poisoned with doubt? Do you walk away with peace, or with more conflict swirling inside your head? Your emotions after the conversation will tell you more truth than the words in it. At the end of the day, wisdom speaks life. Wisdom builds. Wisdom knows that words are like seeds. Whatever you plant, you're going to reap. But an unwise woman plants weeds and then acts surprised when the field is full of thorns. And if you're not careful, you'll end up carrying those weeds into your own life. That's why this sign is so unmistakable. If her words are constantly dripping with gossip and negativity, if every conversation pulls you down instead of lifting you up, you're not just dealing with a bad habit, you're dealing with a lack of wisdom. And the longer you ignore it, the more it will shape you. So the next time you hear her tearing others down, remember this: what you allow in your ears eventually sinks into your heart. And if she doesn't know how to use her words wisely, she's not just speaking about others, she's revealing exactly who she is. Another unmistakable sign you're dealing with an unwise woman is how she makes decisions. Pay close attention to this, because the way a person chooses reveals more about them than anything they say. An unwise woman makes decisions based purely on emotion, not on principle. She lives by how she feels in the moment and not by what's right, consistent, or beneficial in the long run. Emotions are a powerful part of life. They give us joy, compassion, and passion. But when emotions sit in the driver's seat without wisdom holding the wheel, they lead us off the road. An unwise woman doesn't pause to ask, what's the right thing here? What will this cost me later? What values should guide this choice? Instead, she reacts. If she's angry, she lashes out. If she's insecure, she makes demands. If she's jealous, she starts wars where there should have been peace. This pattern becomes clear in everyday situations. Maybe she cancels plans last minute because she doesn't feel like it. Maybe she picks fights when she's stressed instead of addressing the real problem. Maybe she buys things she can't afford, not because she needs them, but because it makes her feel good in the moment. Every choice is rooted in a temporary emotion instead of steady principle. And while it may not seem destructive at first, over time, those small decisions create a life full of instability. When someone lives only by emotion, everything becomes unpredictable. You don't know what you're going to get from day to day because it all depends on her mood. One moment she's warm, the next she's cold. One moment she's encouraging, the next she's tearing you down, and you find yourself constantly walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate her feelings instead of building something steady together. That's what happens when emotions control decisions. They create an unstable foundation where no relationship can thrive. The problem isn't emotions themselves. Everyone has them. The problem is a lack of wisdom to filter those emotions through principles. Principles are like anchors. They keep you steady when the waves of feelings rise and fall. A wise woman can feel anger but still choose patience. She can feel fear but still choose courage. She can feel hurt but still choose forgiveness. That's the mark of wisdom, not the absence of emotion, but the ability to rise above it when making choices. But with an unwise woman, principles take a backseat to whatever she feels in the moment. She'll say things she can't take back just because she was upset. She'll make promises she can't keep just because she was excited. She'll end relationships in anger, then try to pick them up again in loneliness. The cycle repeats, and everyone around her ends up caught in the whirlwind. You may even notice how she justifies these choices. She'll say, "I had to do what felt right," or "I was just being true to myself." But being true to yourself doesn't mean letting every emotion control you. It means aligning with your best self, not your most impulsive self. Wisdom knows that what feels good now can sometimes destroy what's best later. But an unwise woman can't see past the moment. Her feelings are the master, and everything else has to obey. Here's the danger: when you attach yourself to someone like this, their instability becomes your instability. You find your peace rising and falling with her moods. You find yourself exhausted, trying to keep up with her highs and lows. You start compromising your own values just to calm the storm. And the more you give in, the more you lose yourself. Over time, you'll notice that this way of living doesn't just create instability, it creates regret. Because decisions made on emotion often look foolish in hindsight. She may regret what she said, what she did, or what she lost, but instead of learning, she'll repeat the same pattern. That's why this sign is so unmistakable. It's not just about one bad choice, it's about a consistent way of living without principle. Wisdom pauses before reacting. It asks, is this right? Is this true? Will I be proud of this tomorrow? But foolishness doesn't ask those questions. It just acts and then scrambles to clean up the mess later. And the sad reality is, those messes often affect everyone around her. You end up paying the price for her impulsiveness. So how do you recognize this sign? Watch how she handles conflict. Does she stop to think, or does she explode? Watch how she spends her time and money. Does she invest wisely, or chase instant gratification? Watch how she treats commitments. Does she honor them when it's hard, or only when it's convenient? The answers to these questions will tell you more than her words ever will. At the end of the day, emotions are wonderful servants but terrible masters, and an unwise woman lets them master her. If every decision is based on temporary feelings, then every outcome will be temporary too. No stability, no consistency, just a cycle of highs and lows that leaves you drained. That's why this is such a critical sign. Because without the ability to rise above emotion and act on principle, she can't build anything lasting, whether it's trust, peace, or a future. And if you don't see that clearly, you'll spend your life tied to instability, wondering why nothing ever feels secure. So the question you have to ask is simple. Does she let her feelings drive every choice, or does she let wisdom guide her steps? Because the answer will tell you everything you need to know about whether you're dealing with a wise woman or an unwise one. Another unmistakable sign you're dealing with an unwise woman is her relationship with truth. Pay attention to how she handles honesty, because truth is the foundation of trust, and without it, nothing stable can ever exist. An unwise woman bends the truth, avoids accountability, or uses half-truths to protect herself. She treats honesty not as a standard, but as an option, something she'll use only when it benefits her. It starts small. Maybe she tells little white lies to avoid responsibility. She'll say, "I didn't have time," when the truth is she didn't make the effort. Or she'll exaggerate details to make herself look better in a story. At first, these moments might feel harmless, even insignificant, but over time, they create cracks in the foundation of trust. Because once you realize that someone isn't consistently truthful, you start questioning everything they say. And when trust begins to fade, so does the sense of safety in the relationship. An unwise woman often justifies dishonesty by saying she's protecting feelings, avoiding conflict, or simply doing what she had to do. But the truth is, dishonesty is always about self-protection. It's about guarding her ego, her image, or her comfort. And when someone chooses comfort over truth, they sacrifice integrity in the process. That is what makes this sign so dangerous. Dishonesty doesn't just harm relationships. It erodes the character of the person who practices it. When you deal with someone who cannot be fully trusted to tell the truth, you're constantly left in a place of doubt. Did she really mean what she just said? Did she really go where she claimed she was? Did she really have the intention she's presenting? That constant questioning becomes exhausting. Trust is what allows relationships to rest, but with dishonesty, there is no rest, only suspicion. You may also notice that dishonesty rarely stays small. It grows. If she's willing to twist the truth about little things, she'll eventually twist it about bigger ones. Lies have a way of multiplying, because one lie usually requires another to cover it. Before long, the truth becomes so tangled in deception that it's hard to know what's real anymore. And by the time you realize it, you're already caught in the chaos. An unwise woman may also manipulate the truth, not just by lying outright, but by selectively leaving things out. She won't tell the whole story, just the parts that serve her. She may downplay her mistakes, highlight others' flaws, or present half the facts in order to appear blameless. This subtle dishonesty can be even more dangerous than an outright lie, because it leaves just enough truth to look believable while still distorting reality. And when you discover what was hidden, the betrayal cuts just as deeply. Wisdom understands that truth is not always easy, but it is always necessary. A wise woman tells the truth even when it costs her comfort, because she knows integrity is worth more than temporary relief. But an unwise woman trades truth for convenience, forgetting that convenience is fleeting, while broken trust can last a lifetime. The impact of dishonesty shows up in more than just words. It shows up in actions too. Maybe she makes commitments she doesn't intend to keep. Maybe she promises change without the intention of following through. Maybe she says one thing and does another, leaving you confused and frustrated. Words and actions that don't align are just another form of dishonesty, and they're often even more damaging because they reveal a deeper pattern of inconsistency. If you're in close proximity to someone who doesn't value truth, you'll feel it over time. You'll notice that peace never lasts because there's always a hidden agenda or a missing piece of the puzzle. You'll notice that trust never feels whole because there's always a lingering doubt about what's real. And eventually, you'll notice that respect fades because respect cannot survive where truth is absent. This isn't just about protecting yourself from lies, it's about recognizing how dishonesty shapes character. A person who practices dishonesty regularly becomes more comfortable with it. What once made them nervous becomes natural. What once felt wrong becomes routine. And once dishonesty becomes a routine, it doesn't just affect relationships, it becomes who they are. It's also important to see how dishonesty connects with pride. An unwise woman often refuses to admit fault, so she covers her mistakes with excuses or half-truths. Instead of saying, "I was wrong," she says, "That's not what I meant," or "You misunderstood me." She deflects, shifts blame, or changes the subject. This refusal to take responsibility keeps her from growing because growth requires honesty first with yourself. And if she cannot be honest with herself, she certainly won't be honest with you. The unmistakable danger here is that dishonesty always erodes intimacy. You cannot truly connect with someone who won't show you what's real. You may share laughs, experiences, or even years together, but if truth is missing, the bond will always remain shallow. Because intimacy is not just about sharing space, it's about sharing reality, and dishonesty makes reality a moving target. So when you notice this sign, don't ignore it. Pay attention to the patterns. Does she exaggerate? Does she deflect responsibility? Does she leave out key details? Does she bend the truth when it benefits her? If you answer yes, you are not dealing with wisdom. You are dealing with someone who values self-protection over honesty, and that will always come at a cost. At the end of the day, truth is the anchor that keeps relationships steady. Without it, everything drifts. An unwise woman sees truth as optional, but a wise woman knows it is essential. And if you can't count on her words, you won't be able to count on her character. That is why dishonesty is not just a flaw. It is an unmistakable sign of unwise living. Another clear sign of dealing with an unwise woman is how she responds to correction or criticism. Wisdom welcomes feedback because it sees it as a chance to grow, but an unwise woman resists it, deflects it, or takes it as a personal attack. The inability to handle correction is one of the strongest markers of immaturity because it reveals how a person sees themselves and others. You can often see this play out in simple moments. If you point out something small, maybe she made a mistake, forgot a detail, or said something that was hurtful, you'll notice how quickly she shifts into defense. Instead of listening, she argues. Instead of reflecting, she blames. Instead of considering the possibility that she might be wrong, she doubles down. This reaction doesn't come from strength, it comes from insecurity. A wise woman understands that making a mistake doesn't make her unworthy, but an unwise woman sees every correction as proof that she's being judged, and so she resists it with all her energy. It may also show up in excuses. Rather than simply saying, "You're right, I could have handled that differently," she builds a wall of reasons why she did what she did. She'll say she was tired or stressed, or that you misinterpreted her. The pattern is clear. The problem is always something outside of her. Rarely does she say, "I need to take responsibility for this," and here's the danger. If someone never accepts responsibility, they never change. They simply repeat the same behaviors, expecting different results and blaming others when things don't work out. An unwise woman often connects criticism with shame. Instead of separating her actions from her identity, she takes any feedback as a statement about her worth. That's why even gentle correction sparks such strong reactions. If you tell her, "The way you spoke to me felt dismissive," she doesn't hear a comment about behavior, she hears an attack on her character. And once she feels attacked, she defends herself by lashing out or shutting down. This makes it nearly impossible to have honest conversations about growth because the moment correction enters, conflict follows. Wisdom, on the other hand, understands that correction is not rejection. It sees feedback as a tool, not a weapon. A wise woman may not enjoy criticism, but she values it because she knows it sharpens her character. That difference in attitude separates those who mature from those who stay stuck. The unwise woman rejects correction and therefore rejects growth. She protects her pride in the short term, but sacrifices her progress in the long term. You might also notice how she treats correction from others. Does she always have a story about how everyone misunderstands her? Does she dismiss teachers, leaders, mentors, or even close friends because they don't get it? That pattern is another sign of unwise living because it shows she values her comfort over wisdom. When a person shuts out all voices of correction, they trap themselves in an echo chamber of their own making. And in that echo chamber, nothing new can grow. It's not just about refusing criticism, it's about what comes after. An unwise woman often retaliates against correction. If you bring up something uncomfortable, she might throw back an unrelated accusation. "Well, you do this too," or "You're not perfect either." This tactic shifts the focus away from her behavior and puts you on the defensive. But wisdom knows how to sit with correction, even when it stings, and ask, "Is there truth here I need to hear?" Without that humility, relationships become cycles of blame, shifting instead of growth. Over time, this inability to handle correction creates a deeper problem. It isolates her. People get tired of trying to have real conversations when every attempt ends in defensiveness or drama. Friends stop giving honest feedback. Partners stop addressing issues. Colleagues stop offering suggestions. Slowly, she surrounds herself only with people who will affirm her, never challenge her. And when that happens, she may feel supported, but she's actually stuck because growth doesn't come from endless affirmation. It comes from correction paired with encouragement. This also affects trust. When you can't bring up issues without sparking defensiveness, you stop being fully honest. You start keeping things to yourself just to avoid conflict. The relationship then becomes a performance. You smile through frustrations, you swallow your words, and you hide your feelings. But that silence creates distance, and distance eventually destroys connection. By refusing correction, the unwise woman not only limits her growth, but also sabotages the trust of those around her. Correction is a gift. It's not always pleasant, but it's always powerful. It reveals blind spots we can't see on our own. It keeps our flaws from controlling our lives. It humbles us and helps us become better. A wise woman knows this and embraces it even if it hurts. An unwise woman rejects it because she values her pride more than her progress. So pay attention to how she responds when correction enters the room. Does she listen or does she attack? Does she reflect or does she deflect? Does she grow or does she stay the same? These responses tell you everything you need to know. Because in the end, correction doesn't just reveal mistakes, it reveals character. If someone cannot accept correction, they cannot walk in wisdom. And if they cannot walk in wisdom, they will eventually walk away from growth, from respect, and from healthy relationships. That is why the inability to handle correction is such an unmistakable sign of an unwise woman. Another unmistakable sign you are dealing with an unwise woman is how she handles drama and conflict. Life will always present disagreements, challenges, and misunderstandings. Wisdom knows how to navigate them with grace, patience, and clarity. But an unwise woman doesn't just encounter conflict, she often creates it, thrives on it, or magnifies it. Instead of bringing peace, she stirs unrest. Instead of calming storms, she adds fuel to them. This is often seen in her tendency to overreact to small issues. What might have been resolved with a calm conversation quickly escalates into an argument, tears, or accusations. A forgotten text, a delayed response, a minor mistake, these become major battles because she lacks the emotional maturity to keep perspective. A wise woman understands that not every hill is worth dying on, but an unwise woman makes mountains out of molehills, exhausting everyone around her with unnecessary tension. Drama often follows her not by accident, but by habit. She may always have a story about how someone wronged her, betrayed her, or disappointed her. And while everyone faces challenges, the unwise woman seems to live in a cycle where she is always the victim and never the solution. Wisdom looks for patterns and accountability, but an unwise woman looks only for someone else to blame. By constantly painting herself as the center of conflict, she ensures that chaos remains part of her identity. Conflict also becomes a tool in her hands. Instead of using disagreements as opportunities for understanding, she may weaponize them to gain control. She raises her voice, interrupts, or resorts to personal attacks not because she wants resolution, but because she wants to win. And when conflict becomes a contest, respect dies. A wise woman seeks solutions, but an unwise woman seeks victory at any cost, even if it damages the relationship. You may also notice that she spreads conflict beyond the original issue. If you argue about one situation, she may bring up a dozen old problems that have nothing to do with the current moment. This piling on turns every disagreement into a courtroom trial where she plays both lawyer and judge, listing your past mistakes to build her case. That is not a desire for peace, that is a strategy for domination. Wisdom knows how to stay present in a disagreement, but unwise living digs up the past as a weapon. Another mark of this behavior is gossip. An unwise woman rarely keeps conflict between the people directly involved. Instead, she shares her frustrations with friends, family, coworkers, or anyone who will listen. In doing so, she not only poisons others against you, but also avoids the hard work of addressing the conflict directly. Wisdom values privacy and dignity in disagreements. Unwise behavior thrives on public validation. Gossip becomes her way of gathering allies, not solving problems. The most exhausting part of dealing with an unwise woman in conflict is the lack of resolution. Arguments may cool down, but they never truly end. The same issues resurface again and again because there is no willingness to let go, forgive, or move forward. She clings to grudges like evidence files, pulling them out whenever she feels threatened. Without closure, the relationship becomes a cycle of repeated wounds, where healing is impossible because the past is never allowed to rest. This doesn't just damage the relationship, it also drains your energy and peace. Living in constant conflict takes a toll on your mental and emotional health. You find yourself walking on eggshells, careful not to say or do anything that might set her off. You begin to measure your words, not in the name of kindness, but in fear of triggering another storm. And over time, you lose yourself in the process because instead of being authentic, you're simply trying to survive. Wisdom in conflict looks very different. A wise woman may not enjoy disagreements, but she handles them with maturity. She listens before responding, considers the other perspective, and works toward resolution rather than retaliation. She values peace over pride. She may feel anger or frustration, but she doesn't let those emotions control her. That contrast is what makes the unwise woman so unmistakable. Her conflicts don't build bridges, they burn them. It's important to realize that conflict is not the enemy, how we handle it is. With a wise person, conflict can actually deepen trust because it reveals honesty and leads to understanding. With an unwise woman, conflict only multiplies distrust because it is used to control, punish, or manipulate. The difference isn't in the presence of conflict, but in the posture toward it. So pay attention to how she handles disagreements. Does she seek solutions or victories? Does she escalate small issues or bring calm? Does she keep matters private or broadcast them to others? Does she forgive or does she hold grudges like weapons? These answers will tell you everything. Because at the end of the day, wisdom seeks peace while unwise living feeds on drama. And if you find yourself constantly pulled into chaos, drained by endless battles, and robbed of your peace, that is not just difficult. It is a sign. An unmistakable sign that you are dealing with an unwise woman. At the end of the day, recognizing an unwise woman is not about judging, blaming, or tearing someone down. It's about protecting your peace, your growth, and your future. Wisdom isn't always loud, but it's always consistent, and so is foolishness. If you pay attention to the signs, you'll see the pattern. When boundaries are constantly ignored, when respect is lacking, when honesty is treated like an option, when correction sparks defensiveness, when gratitude is absent, and when drama becomes the norm, those are not random flaws, those are patterns of unwise living. And patterns tell you where a person is headed. The truth is, none of us are perfect. We all have blind spots, we all make mistakes, and we all fall short. But the difference between the wise and the unwise is simple. The wise learn, grow, and adjust. The unwise resist, deny, and repeat. That's why these signs matter. Not because you're looking for perfection, but because you're looking for direction. If you ignore the signs, you'll spend your days drained, doubting yourself and living in cycles of conflict that never lead anywhere. But if you pay attention, you give yourself the chance to choose differently. You give yourself permission to guard your peace, protect your boundaries, and invest your energy where wisdom lives. So here's the takeaway. Don't just look at what someone says, watch how they live. Don't just listen to promises, pay attention to patterns. And when you see these unmistakable signs, don't excuse them, don't minimize them, and don't convince yourself they'll magically disappear. Respect what the signs are telling you, because who you choose to walk with shapes the life you build. If you surround yourself with wisdom, you'll grow in wisdom. But if you surround yourself with foolishness, you'll inherit its consequences. Choose carefully. Your future deserves it.